Okay, so I'm the developer of Warsim, and this is going to be a little look into the procedurally generated faces. I haven't counted up how many there are in total because the number differs per race. So some races have, a couple of 100,000. Some races have 50 quadrillion. So it varies massively. So we're going to go into, so we go on the main menu, we're going to go into extras and generators, and then we're going to look for the random face generator. So as you can see, we've got an awful lot. It's hero names, unit names, independent kingdoms. This is the old kingdom generator. Bandit groups. So we've got some interesting ones there. But we're going to ignore these, and we're going to go straight into the random face generators. Now, there's 2 pages of them. This is the second page. So there's quite a lot of different generators. So the man faces, as you can see, that number there, I didn't write that. That number is generated by the computer, figuring out how many that can be made there and then. So I can't even read what that is. That's 760, 815,000, 145 million, 538 billion, 735 trillion, 40 quadrillion. So there's about 40.7 quadrillion human faces. And as you can see, they vary in some ways massively, and in some ways not so much. Like, for example, these guys both have a sort of similar shaped jaw, sort of similar beards, but this guy's chin is thinner. This guy's got sort of nose piercings and a fat nose, and then a sort of really straight edge up part there, and this guy's got a kind of like bended in nose thing. So they vary in some ways and then not so much in others. So you see some interesting ones every now and then. But as with random generation, it's interesting because in a way they all eventually, you don't really notice differences between them. You see so many of them, eventually they're all going to look the same. But I mean, what I can confirm is every single face we've seen, like this guy now, will never be seen again. Will never be generated again. There's no chance. There's literally no mathematical chance that will appear again. It can't happen because there are so many of them. So it's really interesting in a way that these guys are just like deleted forever, and also kind of sad. So we've got orc faces. So there's not as many of these guys. What have we got there? That's 466 million. So we've got about 3 trillion, 3 billion. I don't know. So orcs all look kind of the same. They got the same ears. They've usually got earrings, and they got these weird looking little smiles. So these are orcs. I'm gonna move this mouse out of the way. We got giants. So giants look really stupid. But you should have seen what they looked like originally. This is a dream of it what they used to look like. So my idea behind it was that giant faces are kind of warped, because they've grown so much that they haven't grown properly, maybe. So they're all caved in a little bit, and they're not right. They're a bit disproportionate. They kind of look like giant potatoes. And there's a very small amount of them in comparison to other races, for example. So we've got 379,000. So we've got about 1.6 billion of them, which is quite a few compared to the others. And we got goblins. So goblins taking a while to generate because again there's not so many of them, and it's because part of their faces are quite small. So these guys, some of them have like thick foreheads. They vary quite a lot. There's some lag there based on the way the generator works. So they do look quite different. Like these guys have really fat foreheads, but some of them have quite thin ones, like this guy. So they do look different. I do like goblins, the way the face generator works for them. We've got mermen next. Mermen are sea people. They all look very similar. I find the mermen are one of the hardest races to tell that. I mean, on the surface they don't look the same. Like you can tell with blatant things like this, but other than that, it's really hard to tell that the bottom of their mouth isn't different. They all kind of tend to look quite similar. Liches, one of the undeads. They vary quite a bit, but then again, all look kind of the same. Because it's just they're the most sort of mixed up of all the face shapes, because obviously their skulls can be any shape, so they all do look quite different in some ways. And there's actually surprisingly not that many of them. We got Cyclops. So this is what the giants used to look like. I do need to probably update Cyclops at one time. But for now, it's okay. These guys, I mean, literally, this is like a random tomato generator. Okay, what have we got next? Demons. So these, I've gone for more of an Asian demon kind of style with these guys. They kind of look like what they call like Oni. I don't know what they're called. I think. It's just because it was convenient because it looks good. But there's very few of these. 16 million of them. Only 16 million. I mean, it's a tiny number really compared to the other ones, and it's amazing that you can sort of poo-poo a figure of several million randomly generated faces because the rest of his generator is so big. This one will probably be similarly small for lizards because part of their face. I mean, there's only so much you can do with 4 lines, and it lags quite a lot because of the way the generator works at the moment. But it will be worked soon. So there's 20,000 of them, so absolutely no real difference. This is the worst one, hands down. So we've got demigods. So demigods are really weird. But what I was thinking, I mean, with this game, and what I do like, I guess, about Warsim and game development in general is that the developer gets to put their own spin on things. So, I mean, with some fantasy games, you get people doing, you know, the same races that you're used to seeing 1,000 times over in exactly the same way, and there's nothing wrong with that. You get some that make their own slight change, and some that make vast changes to the races you're used to seeing. And I think, while I'm not doing anything crazy in some ways, I do like to put my own mark on the races I have in my game and make them my own in a way. So, for example, these demigods, they're weird. These aren't, you know. I mean, it's hard to imagine what you'd imagine demigod at, but that's what I've got there. So I don't know. I like the way it comes across. And we've got dwarves. Dwarves are basically just fat-faced, big-beard humans. And I even did mess around with a female dwarf concept, which you can see in the concept art section of the game. And they look really weird. They just have really frilly beards, and that's about it. I'm quite happy with the way the dwarves work out, though. We've got a couple of million or billion even. I can't even read these numbers anymore. We got the elf generator. Now, what you'll notice with the elf generator and the one following is some connections. So there's a very small amount of them. There's 3 million elves, and I mean, I love how they come out. I love how elves look in the game. It makes me happy to see elves. But the problem is, I generated an elf one day, and I was like, holy shit, that elf looks like a vampire. And so I used it for vampire faces. So the vampire faces are essentially exactly the same as elves, except they always have fangs. That's the only difference. Vampires always have fangs, and they never look elf-like any other way, other than the default one, I guess. And I think, I'm not sure if there's more elf faces than vampire ones. Yeah. So vampires are kind of like a sub-section of elf face generator. Minotaurs, then, they're very different to all the others. I still can't get. I don't know if I like them or not. I do like how they looked so different to everything else, but they do look weird. I'll give them that. So there's that. And we got ogres. Ogres I like. Ogres look like what orcs sort of you would imagine would look like, but I guess they have such rock solid chins that they do kind of look like ogres. There's quite a lot of them. I mean, they look pretty good, so I'm happy with them. And we got gnomes. Gnomes, essentially, just squashed faces with hats on top of them. And there's a hell of a lot of gnomes just because there are so many different hats they can wear as well. So some look sort of semi-normal, some look weird and feral like this guy. So we're going on to the next page now. So we got zombies. So zombies, you'd think were like what was that other race we were looking at earlier? The liches, but they're very different. They have more visible sort of features, and a much more variation on their face. So there are lots of these. And we got trolls. So trolls, like ogres, have really solid looking faces, but trolls are obviously huge, scary beasts. And I mean, they look like fortresses. They look weird. Then we got ghosts. So you can see this massive variation in the way ghosts look. They're one of my favourite looking races, and it took me probably the longest to make this particular generator. But yeah, so that's that. We've got Ents next. So Ents are essentially just lines, eyes, and mouths, and the occasional twig. But I do like them. They're kind of I think someone described them to me as kind of Adventure Timey looking, and I guess in a way they are. But there's not much else to them really. So that's Ents, and we got Mushroom Men. So this is a push really, to make this a race, but I did. I don't wanted to give them a face generator, so this is how they look. Again, they are pretty odd, but there you go. Golems. This was kind of like a real off-the-cuff face generator. I wasn't normally I have an idea in my mind and I go, yes, that's exactly what a race should look like. With this, I drew a random thing and I was like, oh, that could probably go by as a golem, so I used it as the golem faces, because it was quite, they're quite like squared and strange, like I suppose could be done through stone. But yeah, I'm not overly satisfied with this face generator, but it works, so I'm happy with it for now. Okay, Nulls are next. Now this generator was actually, I didn't really make the original artwork for this. Now I'm for the vast majority of this game, I've drawn everything myself. But this one was actually sent to me by someone who played the game. They said, hey, here's a random like Null face, and I really liked it, so I made as many variations of it as I could to make this generator, and it works. It's really cool. And then I made a thread, and we got a lot of similar responses. So a lot of these faces now are suggestions. So we had the witch's face. Sometimes they look terrible, but sometimes they look really cool. These are witches. This was sent in by a player, and then I made as many amendments as I could. So the player sent in one single original witch, and I made this many different kinds of it by adding variations to each part. We also have dryads, which I think I made myself. Dryads all have like the long hair, but they're kind of like goblin-y. There's a hell of a lot of those. Then we've got harpies. This was another player created suggestion, and a fun fact as well. In the throne room, harpy faces are generated for hags who appear in your court, so they have other uses. We've got kobolds. This was another player suggestion. Kobolds have really complex looking faces, so a player sent this in to me and then I modified it. I love kobold faces. They are very refined and strange. They look almost like insect-like. And then we've got trows. So this was another player sent suggestion. Trows look unsettlingly weird, but I like them. Then we have mutants. Mutants are actually literally identical and use the human face generator, which is why there are so many possible faces to be generated, because this uses the human face generator. The only difference is that it uses it skips, because the way the face generator goes, it grabs a line from it goes to a text file basically that holds all the foreheads or all the hair of every sort of race, and it looks for one that suits the race you're generating. Then it gets eyebrows, then it gets eyes, then it gets nose and ears, then it gets upper lip, then it gets mouth, then it gets chin. So what happens is when we get to the eye part of the human generator, it says if it's actually a mutant, skip this and open them, or look for a mutant eye instead, which it finds. So we always have 3 eyes. But aside from that, identical to the human face generator. And this was not the only time I used this sort of where a race generator was riding on the back of another. So we did the same with Cthulhs. Cthulhs are essentially the same again. They use human faces until the bottom 3, where they have sort of this weird tentacle generator instead. But the top 4 slots use the exact same as humans. And finally, the most recent race. I mean, essentially, they look like Jabba the Hutt, like all of them. But these are abominations, and this was something I added recently for a laugh. And they are very strange. So overall, I mean, the number of different possible faces that can be generated by this game are somewhere in the high quadrillion. I think probably at least, I don't know, I want to say 100 quadrillion or more. And I think that would probably be an understatement. And, I mean, there are plenty more to come. I mean, in total there are about 70 races using those different face generators. But there are more races that don't have any. So there's definitely more that can be made in the future. And you can download the game for free. And if you actually have any suggestions, if you're like an ASCII artist and you like making sort of random faces, please don't hesitate to send me one. I mean, you can get me on Reddit, on the subreddit of the game, or in a YouTube comment even. And if you have any sort of ASCII art ideas for random races, send them to me, and you'll end up in the credits. So thanks very much for watching, guys.